Welcome to Expanding Your Faith, a podcast hosted by Bishop Greer Godsey of the Old Catholic Churches International. Expanding Your Faith brings together a panel of well-educated clergy and laity to discuss modern events with a biblical perspective. Our podcast is about to start. Please stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Expanding Your Faith. I'm Bishop Greer, and joining me this evening is Bishop Ben.
Hello, greetings to everybody.
And welcome to Season 9 of our podcast here for your listening pleasure.
Season 9, Episode 1.
Season 9, Episode 1. I would have never thought we would have gotten this far. So many people were betting against us, and yet
Exactly.
here we are. 9 seasons in, and still people listen to us.
It's been a good ride so far.
It has. It's been a very good ride, and we've enjoyed quite a few interesting topics over the last several years. Looking at various different faith practices and looking at scripture and looking at various social justice issues that surround us. And of course, we start out here with the first podcast of this season on the first day of June, which happens to be Pride Month. And so we may talk about that a little bit tonight, as well as, some of the things that are going on in the world as well. We're still, 2 years into the fighting between Russia and Ukraine, and
Now we had
about
Jerusalem.
8 months into the current flare-up between the Palestinians and the Israelis,
Mm-hmm.
as well as, the former president being found guilty of felony crimes. And now we have all kinds of threats against the LGBT community because people are angry that the former president got held accountable for things that he did, and they're taking that out on the LGBT community. So a lot going on in our world since we took our break at the end of April. So,
And there's quite a lot to unpack and quite a lot of things to think about, like what religious implications may be coming from, thinking about what kind of impact would it have on the churches because of the current situation with Trump being convicted. If any implications, is there any implications that could be there?
well, I think there are plenty of implications, especially for the church right now. The church has tied itself so heavily to politics. And because of that, they are now facing a serious issue.
Correct.
Because once Trump's empire collapses entirely, the church is going to be left holding the sack.
And it makes you wonder too, how is it gonna shape our future? How are we gonna do things differently, and how are we gonna handle church safety current in the coming events? Like we're coming up to November pretty soon. what kind of safety aspect do we have to look for to protect our congregations too?
Right,
Because we have a duty to protect our congregation.
right. And I suspect progressive congregations are going to be, you know, in the thick of this. So it's going to take a lot of work for us to overcome the kinds of things that we're going to face in the next few weeks.
Correct. And one has to wonder, you know, and of course I'm gonna go there with the hot button topic. Abortion is gonna be on the number one the topic of women's rights.
Well,
You
of
know,
course.
we're gonna have to see what's gonna happen in the future and how that the new administration is gonna handle that. If any, if they're gonna address it or they're just gonna let it stand. I think it should be addressed
Of course.
because we need to stop. We need to stop the draconian laws like here in Texas where they're trying to tell women that they can't have an abortion. What gives the state the right to make that decision for a woman
Right?
or for anybody for that matter?
Exactly. I'm reminded of Dietrich Bonhoeffer back during the time when the Third Reich was running Germany. And Bonhoeffer was offered an opportunity to flee to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
to actually stay in the United States, because he had been here uh, on a travel visa for a little while, working with some of the churches in the United States. And ultimately, he said that he could not stay here and hide from what was going on in Germany. He had to go and stand up and speak out, because if he didn't, then when the war was over, he would have no moral standing to speak. And I think that that is very true today of many clergy. They have not spoken up against the draconian laws, the attack against women and LGBT, the lies and misinformation promulgated by the former president and his team. And so, when all of this is said and done, they're not going to have the moral fortitude to be able to stand up and say anything, because, well, they help push this, draconian, backwards, out of place, arduous, or abusive towards people.
Mm-hmm. And you know, one has to think and ponder: are you really? And this is more like towards religious leaders and pastors like us. If you're not speaking out, are you truly a man of God? Are you truly standing up for what you believe? If you're not speaking
Right,
out,
right,
and can you truly call yourself a pastor or a clergyman or an ally
right.
or a support person to support somebody if you're not speaking out against the injustices?
I agree.
And how can you stand up in the pulpit and say one thing and then not speak out in public?
Exactly.
You have to have that face out in public. You just can't have a church face. You have to be willing to step out of the confines of the church and make a public appearance.
Agreed.
And if you can't do that, then don't call yourself a clergyman or an ally or an advocate for somebody
Agreed.
because you're not. But one has to think too about what what is the future going to look like after the election for the new administration is going to take place. How are they going to handle things? And just say the former president Donald Trump does get in, he's going to be a convicted felon president. Okay,
Hmm.
what doors is that opening for other people across the U.S.? Is it opening doors for convicted felons to be nurses, be doctors, be police officers, lawyers, judges? Where
Right.
does it end?
Well, and therein lies the other thing is so many Christians are supportive of that kind of lifestyle, which runs directly opposed to what we're taught in Scripture.
Correct.
You know, we're taught not to steal. We're taught not to lie. We're taught not to commit adultery. We're taught, yeah, you just go on and on and on, and yet the former president has done all of that, and Christians are cheering him on.
Hmm.
And I have to wonder, you know, I have to wonder, do they have the moral authority now to speak?
And see that that's good. That's a very good question and a very astute observation. But you had to wonder too. Think about if if the Christians are supporting him. What kind of Christian is supporting him? Is it uh, a liberal Christian? Is it a progressive Christian? What kind of Christian is it that's supporting Donald Trump?
Right,
And you have to think about what's going through their mind of how can you vote for a convicted felon? I know that this is all new territory for the U.S. and this is a new precedence that we have set. But at what point are we willing to say enough is enough?
right.
Is my question to the community. But also as clergymen too, we need to stand up and say, hey, if we're gonna set standards and morals, and we're gonna use Christianity as that check and balance, then we need to start with the first one that Jesus taught us, and that's love your neighbors, love yourself.
Right.
But we can't even get there at all.
Isn't that the truth?
We can't even get that close.
It's very true.
So one has to wonder where are we gonna stand, and and one has to wonder what is God thinking about all this.
Well, that's a good point too.
I can't answer for God, but I can answer for myself and my parish.
Right.
My parish, my parishioners are scared.
And I don't blame them. Not
They're
the
very
least bit.
scared.
And the reality is that we also have gotten into this mentality that the truth is a lie, the lie is a truth, love is hate, hate is love. It's almost like an upside down world that we live in today.
Yeah, it's like everything got, for some reason, the lack of a better term, got reversed.
Right.
But how? But the thing is, how did we get there, and how do we fix it?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer.
And see, it comes across to another topic to ponder. I know I'm throwing out a lot of issues, but there's a lot of food for thought for upcoming years. I ran across a podcast called Hey Chaplain, and he was giving a very good lecture on how do you serve God without a conscience.
Mm,
He said that he's run into a lot of clergy that are serving God without conscience or morals.
that's hard. We're supposed to be people that come to things from a point of conscience and morals,
Correct.
and we sadly don't do it.
And one of our followers here says, Trump supporters having a hard time believing he's guilty. But see, the thing is, they bought into his story that he's given, his narrative,
Right.
that everything is corrupt, that everything is a farce. It's rigged. But he's also saying, also using that, but also going on the other hand, and going on truth social, and holding up a Bible saying, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And he's got the Bible upside down. So what does that tell you? And then you got governors and senators like here in Texas trying to use their Christianity to make laws for against women, against the LGBTQ. Where does it stop?
Right.
Since when do we allow the Bible to become the authority in the state to make rules and regulations?
It's a good question.
Yes, the Bible was used for God's law, but it wasn't intended to make hateful and bigoted laws and regulations against people.
Right.
But that's strictly, coming from a part where, like here in Texas, where the governor is completely backwards on thinking.
Right.
Like one thing that aggravates me to no end is he wants to put the Ten Commandments and prayer back in school. What about the people that don't subscribe to the Christianity? What about the atheists, the Muslims, the Mormons? All the religions or no religion at all whatsoever. What about those people? How do we cover them? Are we just gonna sit here and force our beliefs on them?
Well, you see,
That's
and
not right.
therein lies the issue. I'd love to see the verses that say, force your beliefs on others.
Correct. Where does it say that?
Where are those verses in the Bible?
Like the letter I sent to Abbott stating, well, if we're gonna put the Ten Commandments, then we're gonna have to put the a portion of the Quran, the Torah. We got to put portions of all the religions up on the wall. I hope you have a wall big enough for that.
Right.
And of course,
Absolutely.
there's no response. But the whole thing about that is again we're going back to the issue of when is enough and how do we fix it?
Right.
But also not only us religious leaders, but also our parishioners too. They have to speak out too.
Yeah, it behooves every person in the pew to speak out against this kind of abuse and misuse of power and everything else.
Correct. And also it lands on our laps too as pastors because we have to put the word out there and educate our congregation to speak up. But if we're not educating our congregation, it's our fault too.
Right.
Because we have to be the first leader to show them that we're leading and then they can follow us to help bolster the stance on things.
Right.
And what scares me is we're coming into another wonderful Pride month for June, another year of Pride. What's gonna happen? We're already having FBI warnings to keep an eye out for our peers and our family during their Pride parades and Pride
Right.
month
Right.
for terrorist attacks. That makes me scared.
Of course.
What's gonna happen? Who's gonna protect us?
And therein lies the big question. We have allowed so much to occur over the last couple of years, with Trump and others, that we're now stuck. We're now
Correct. And
stuck.
we are stuck in it, and it's a scary situation for all of us. And if you're not scared, you should be scared for the people that are listening because you have to think. And I know the mentality. Well, I'm not part of that community, so it doesn't affect me. But that's where you're wrong
It does affect you.
because if they're making laws against the LGBT community, before you know it, they're gonna come after somebody else.
Right.
They're gonna come after the people of color. They're gonna come after the Jewish community. They're gonna come after the Russian community. They'll be coming after the community one after another, making these laws that you can't do this, you can't do that. So it does affect the community at large.
It does.
It's like I have one.
Tremendously.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tremendously.
Yeah, and we also had we had the old saying, going back to talking about abortion. The women that do abortion, the older ladies that had their kids already say, "Well, it doesn't bother me because I already have my kids. I had a hysterectomy, so how does that affect me?" It does because they're attacking your right to do what you want to do with your body.
Right.
But they don't see that.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry that the podcast turned into a political thing, but that's what we're facing right now.
Well, we're kind of moving in whatever generic direction the spirit leads today. It's kind I came into the podcast with no preconceptions tonight, so
Me too. I just asked God to lead me wherever I needed to be where we needed to touch.
and the
Because there
reality is that we face so much in the world today that it's hard to maintain a sense of spirituality. You
it
know,
is.
I find myself struggling with that all too often because everything that goes on in the world just makes me angry.
Yep.
It frustrates me. It makes me want to bash my head against a wall. Yeah, you know, Christians who claim to be such good Christians but then act so abusive, so condescending, so hateful towards others, you know, and I'm like, come on, people, this is not what Jesus taught us to do.
Correct.
But sadly, that's exactly what today's world wants. They want Christians who act that way. And we buy into it. We let people co opt our religion for hateful and abusive means, and then we just sit back and watch it.
Correct. And you know what? For me too, I struggle as a pastor of my parish. I struggle because I'm constantly asking myself, I find things that anger me, and I had to sit there and figure out how do I let go of this anger and
Right,
this frustration because I can't go up to the altar and be on the altar with a bad heart.
right,
I have to have a clean heart for Sunday, and I struggle those days. Like, how do I let this anger and this frustration go?
right,
Because I have to be, well, we both, all of us clergymen, have to be pure of heart to help our congregation because they're suffering too.
right.
They've been through a week of hell for all we know. That's why I always constantly ask my congregation people. I ask them, "Am I doing a good job? How am I being effective for you? What can I change to make better for you all?" I'm constantly asking for input so I know how to improve.
And I think that's excellent.
I always try to ask, where are we headed in the parish? Where would you like to see the parish headed? Where would you like to see things improved, and where do we not need improvement, but where do we need improvement?
Right,
What could be done better to assist the LGBT community? How do we address homelessness, the neediness, everything, every issue? We try to look for balances on how to improve. And I think every clergyman during this time of season that we're in right now, because it is a hard season coming up, and we're gonna be in for, I really believe, a rough 4 years
oh, I agree.
for the next term. We don't know who's gonna get it, and that's really what's scaring a lot of people.
I agree.
Things are up on the end right now, so we had to look for leaders like us to lead the congregation, but we also have to turn to God and let God guide us with that too,
Yep.
and see where God's gonna take it. But you had, like I said, you had to think we're coming up to, like we said, we're coming up to Pride. We're coming up to a lot of different things in the season. How can we make it better? How do we make it better spiritually and physically?
Right. I don't want to get into partisan politics on the podcast, Imp. I would just say, from my point of view, my suggestion to people is this: we can see the candidates who are living messages that are not in line with what we consider to be moral or lawful or acceptable. And I think that we should avoid candidates like that. Candidates that choose to abuse the law, choose to twist the law to their desires, candidates who have promised to be dictators day one. I think that we have to run from those types of people and towards people who are more about doing the best that they can to help everyone. Far too often, especially Christians, we're really bad about this. We look for the perfect candidate. There is no perfect candidate in politics. So instead of seeking out perfection, okay, no, you're fine. Instead of seeking out perfection, we need to seek out sometimes better is good enough. You know, if it's a toss up between Hitler reincarnated and Neville Chamberlain, I'm going to choose Chamberlain every single time. I mean, yes, Neville Chamberlain was not the perfect British prime minister, and he acquiesced way too much. But considering the alternative, I would choose Chamberlain every time. And so I think that that has to be one of the mindsets we get away from is we're not going to find the perfect candidate. So let's find one that's at least not going to try to genocide a bunch of people. And then, secondly, secondly, we also have to get away from one issue voting.
Correct. I agree with that.
One issue voting is very dangerous. You know, when we sit and go, well, I'm going to vote for this candidate because he's anti abortion. That's what a lot of people did when Trump ran the first time. Oh, I'm only voting for him because he's anti abortion. Or I'm only voting for him because he's good for the economy. Or I'm only voting for him because of XYZ. Then we end up with what we had. And we end up with then a spread of racism and bigotry and all kinds of abusive, you know, behavior is that mentality. Let's just get somebody in there who, fits into my perfect view.
And
My
see,
view.
and here that's been lies with the issue is there's so many. The U.S. is so diverse between beliefs. How do you pick a candidate that is going to work for everybody?
That's a good
That's
point.
another issue.
That's a very good point. And the reality is, not every candidate's going to be able to do everything for everybody. Okay, there are going to be things that we disagree on, you know. But the reality is that the candidate should work for as many people as humanly possible, not for a simple, small minority of people like the former administration was. We're going to cater to the 20%, and everybody else, well, they're just out of luck. We can't do that. We can't, you know, we have to look for candidates who try to help the majority of people. It's that simple.
Correct. And you know, you sit and you look at the current two candidates, and not to bring up anything, you know, just to start a fire, but if you look at Donald Trump's mannerisms, what does he resemble? To me, it resembles his hand movements and everything resembles Hitler. Do we want another Hitler on our hands?
And I'll leave that
Do
rhetorical question right there.
exactly, and that's why I said it. You know, it's a rhetorical question, and it didn't require an answer. But you know, do we really want that kind of person?
We also have to be very careful, too, though, of vilifying the other side.
Correct, correct,
Yes, the former president is a bad person, but that said, I think that the majority of people supporting him are not necessarily bad people. They're just extremely blinded.
correct. And the thing is, how do you fix that? How do we try to not really not that they're broken, but I don't think that they're seeing the bigger picture for
Right.
the whole entire country.
They have a very
The
narrow,
picture.
myopic view of the world.
Exactly, and I remember several conversations that we've had in several other lives with you, and you know your history, even your history professor has mentioned that we're gonna see history repeat itself.
Right.
And what are we seeing? What are we seeing now?
Yeah. We're facing that very same possibility of
Exactly,
history
and
repeating itself. Yeah.
and it is a scary thing to think about because we even see people like the Bishop of Rome making statements and then retracting them. So if he's making statements like that to his congregation and to his leadership, you know, he had to think about that too. You know, what implications is he making too?
Well, and it's a good segue into the fact that last week Pope Francis met with bishops on their ad litem visit to Rome.
Correct. That's why I brought that up.
For those that are not aware of what that means, so the Pope of Rome, or the Bishop of Rome, he every so often will call for an ad litem visit, which means basically shining the light. Basically, it's a get together so that, bishops and all can come and address the Pope with concerns from their diocese. He can address his concerns with their leadership and whatnot. And so during his most recent ad litem with the bishops, he utilized a slur against the LGBT community. Oh, in particular, gay men mostly, but he used the F word, that's a slur,
Mm-hmm.
in his conversation with them, and it got released, you know, and it was very damaging to a lot of people because, they've seen the Pope as somebody who is, trying to be somewhat progressive, somewhat open minded. The problem is that by him using that slur, it's really shown them that, you know, he's not as
Progressive as you think.
progressive as he says he is.
Mm.
Now, he came out and apologized for it, said he didn't realize that it was a slur,
Mm-hmm.
but I find that very, very hard to
Hard to
believe,
believe. Yeah.
given his age and whatnot, that he would not know that that was a slur.
Correct. And you know, too, you had to think about what message is he sending because on one hand he says that he wants the church to be more inviting and more understanding towards the LGBTQ community, but on the other hand, lets the F word slip. What kind of message is he really sending?
Right.
And I don't see enough of us progressive clergy even speaking about it or even saying anything about how he's handling that situation.
Yep.
Because ultimately, what he says too, regardless if we believe it or not, and we subscribe to following him, regardless of what how he acts, that does affect us in some way.
Right.
It
It does.
it's I believe in it's a trickle down effect
Certainly.
because we have congregation members like I do that turn to me and say, "Well, why is the pontiff talking like this?" Well,
Right.
I can't speak for the pontiff because I'm not in his realm.
Right.
But I can only speculate that he's trying to be progressive, but not being allowed to
Well, there's that, but there's still a lot of him that is not
progressive.
progressive,
Yep,
as we saw in his comments.
exactly. And you sit there and you had to think about, think about is he truly just making lip service or is he truly mean it by his heart? And again, there we go. We can't speak for him because we're not with him,
Right.
so we can only speculate. And like my congregation person today asked me about that. I said, well, I can't speak on that. I can't speak on what's in his mind and his heart because I don't know.
Right.
I said, but ultimately, what he says does affect us because we have people questioning, well, why is he talking like that? But then again, here it is again. That again, it comes back to us progressive clergy that we need to speak out and say, hey, we don't support that. We don't
Agreed.
support what he's saying
Agreed.
because all that's doing is creating more religious trauma and more religious stigmatism. Saying, well, hey, well, you're a priest, well, you must be like him. We can't we can't afford in the community to keep spreading and keep continuing supporting the hatred and the religious trauma. We have to stop it somewhere.
Right.
So
Agreed.
in that so in the end of that fact is where do we go from there? And the thing is, how do we teach our young parishioners, our young clergymen that are coming in, or even people that are coming into the church from a different faith? How do we educate them on how to handle things religiously and circularly in the circular world? How do we expand their, for lack of a better term, expand their faith and expand their knowledge?
Well, that takes time and a lot of hard work because, first of all, people have to be willing to learn.
Correct.
And for a lot of people, that's just not, they just don't. They don't want to learn. But that should never stop us from doing the best we can to try to educate others, you know?
Exactly. And, you know, we're headed down that road of education for our clergy people and our congregations. But as let's just say we have a young priest coming into is going to become a young person going to come into the diaconate and become a diaconate application person. How do us as religious leaders, how do we guide them and make sure we steer them clear of the dangers? That's not always possible, but we can try to educate them and steer them away from the pitfalls.
Agreed.
We can use our own experiences as leaders to show them, hey, we made this mistake. Don't fall down this hole this time. Don't go down that hole.
Right.
But it's up to us to do that. And if we're not willing to do that, then how are we going to make affect change?
It's a good
You
point.
know, we discussed this with Reverend Mark several times too, and we had very good discussions on if we're gonna be the shepherd of the flock, we have to be willing to smell like the sheep.
Agreed.
And if we don't smell like the sheep, then how are we being effective for the congregation and the flock?
That's a good point.
If that makes sense, what I'm saying.
It makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. We
You
have
know,
to slowly educate
correct.
and bring people back to the point to where they understand the teachings of the Bible as they actually exist,
Are
not,
yep.
you know, not what they've been erroneously taught.
And see that's herein lies the problem is we got different denominations like the Baptists and the the fundamentalist Christians that like to twist the Bible into their narrative
Right.
and use it as a weapon against the community, the LGBT community. And
Right.
that's what in itself causes religious trauma, religious heart hurt.
I
And it
agree.
scares people away from the church.
Certainly.
I spend more time, believe it or not, as a pastor and as an emergency chaplain, I spend more time undoing religious trauma and hurt than actually ministering to people.
I understand that.
A lot of my time is undoing the hurt and trying to rebuild their trust.
Yeah, so many people have been hurt by the church over the years, and it behooves us to repair that damage as much as humanly possible.
Exactly. And but rebuilding a burned bridge is hard,
It is.
very hard. I the best thing I tell people all the time is, well, I'm trying to show the love that Jesus showed. Love everybody the way he loves like he loves himself.
Right.
That's the way I live my life. I treat everybody the way I want to be treated. Love and respect.
Exactly.
If we could only get that across, that message across, not only the US, but across the world, into the four corners of the world, we would be a better place. And I know that's impossible to try to, not really impossible, but it's a good feat to try to get that message across.
Right.
And we have so many people that are hurt by the church that they don't believe that it's possible to spread love.
I think it's entirely possible. We just have to do it.
Exactly. We need to take time to show people our love and our respect and show people that we are different and that we are not like the old churches in the old days.
Right.
And I'm sure Reverend Margaret has something more insightful to say about everybody now, but unfortunately, he's not here to help right now.
Well, he'll be back hopefully next week.
For
And
his insight,
we're going to go ahead and wind down for tonight. But I want to thank Imp and Father David and everybody, Bishop Ben,
yes.
uh, for coming and participating tonight. And we hope that Reverend Mark is having a good and restful weekend as he
Mm-hmm.
takes the weekend off. And we'll see him next week, I hope. But until then, we hope that you'll continue to join us as we work to expand your faith. Until then, keep shining bright, my friends. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Expanding Your Faith. For more information on expanding your faith, check us out on facebook.com/expanding your faith. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever you find your podcasts. Until next week, when we once again attempt to expand your faith, keep shining bright. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Expanding Your Faith. For more information on Expanding Your Faith, check us out on facebook.com/Expanding Your Faith. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever you find your podcasts. Until next week, when we once again attempt to expand your faith, keep shining bright.